you may have saw the flyer of all the town halls I'm going to do, and so kicking off the world tour of HD68 here at Valley View, Texas. And so I was talking about how neat the gym looked and how great it is, and hopefully they washed off all that luck they had, because they continue to cause a lot of problems with Sacred Heart and my daughter and my son whenever we had to come over here and play Valley View. So you know, maybe we'll be a little bit luckier and it'll be a little more neutral for a while, but I doubt it. So again, and for those who don't know me or about my family, yesterday I celebrated my 24th wedding anniversary to Lydia, and so you know, I did, you know, it was just the world's greatest husband. And what I do, I took her to a committee meeting in Austin to listen about deer breeding. So, but we did have dinner on the way back home. But and then 3 kids. My youngest is sophomore. She is my girl, Kate, and plays basketball. Grant, senior, almost got the last boy out of the house, and that'll be an accomplishment. But then my oldest, I don't know if I say he's a junior, senior, somewhere in that sort of years at Texas A&M studying mechanical engineering, working this summer interning in the oil and gas industry, and really enjoying that. And so everybody's doing good. And you know, the best thing about you know, Texas, and I think Rick Perry said it last time he ran for president, is, you know, we're part-time legislators. We got to live with the laws and the rules we pass, and it's good to be back home. You know, I don't. People say, do you live in Austin? I say, no, I visit there. I live in Munster, Texas, live in Cook County, and I wouldn't have it any other way from that standpoint. To give you a few highlights of what we had in the 84th legislation overall, and then we'll come back and talk about some of the specific bills we did and what we're looking to work on. And I'm going to try not to talk for anywhere near the full time, because I really want to take questions from you guys. But first and foremost, the only thing we have to do is pass a budget. We passed a very conservative one. You may have seen some mailers have started already coming out. Greg Abbott commented on it. You know, one of the best conservative budgets he's ever seen. Sort of the new standard of measuring is, did you keep it with population and inflation? And we were below population inflation, although inside that number included $800 million for border security. We would look at that as really the Fed should be paying for that, but it's very important for those of us in Texas to make sure we're protecting our Texans. And so we did have that money in there. We're going to look to put 250 new DPS troopers on the border permanently. That's going to benefit Cook County an awful lot, because, you know, these two guys, Chris and Ryan up here, that you know, work to protect us here in Cook County. They've had to take away from their families and their lives and go down to the border to protect us from that aspect. And so, you know, first and foremost, I really appreciate everything y'all have done. Y'all don't hear it enough. You know, we talk about our military, the sacrifices they make to go away from their families. You guys have made the same great sacrifice, and, you know, I appreciate it very much, and it means an awful lot to me. So, you know, inside of that, to try to get our counts up, because it's tough to be able to say we're going to bring 250 new troopers in, be able to train them and bring them up, because we have a need for more than that right now. We were actually asking them to work 50 hours a week, and we've got that in the budget. And so not only are they going to be doing that, but maybe by not having to go to the border, we're going to ask them to work at home about 50 hours a week, and that'll help. Also, one thing that starts to help on border security, we need to start talking about it everywhere, is we're doing E-Verify for all state employees and all state contractors. So we're starting to go with that. You know, wish E-Verify was run by the state instead of the feds, because there are some problems, some issues. It doesn't work perfectly, but we need to be able to address that in our immigration plan. Also in that budget included an additional $1.5 billion for K-12 education. That was above and beyond growth of population and inflation in there. And so we did put some money back in. I've got some more we'll talk about on education, and obviously happy to answer any questions here in a minute. Last thing, sort of numbers standpoint, we did tax cuts. You know, the best thing we had was we spent a lot of time, and I was on Ways and Means, and I was happy to be on that committee. I was on Ag and Livestock and Ways and Means, but Ways and Means deals with all the tax policy. Appropriations doesn't necessarily always touch everybody in the state of Texas, but our tax policies do. And we argued about what taxes are we going to cut, and a lot of people had strong opinions on them, but my legislative aide, Kate Ferguson over here, she's from Connecticut and going to school at University of Texas. She sent me one that's like, Connecticut just passed a huge tax increase. And so, it's great to be in Texas where we're arguing over lowering taxes. And so we're going to have homestead exemptions are going to go up to $10,000. That assumes that the voters approve them in the November constitutional election. Have a hard time thinking that that is not going to pass. If I was a gambling man, that would be about the safest bet I think you could put on the books, is that will pass. The other one we did tax cut wise, big tax cut wise I should say, because we did a whole lot of other ones, dealt with eliminating 25% of the margins tax, or the franchise tax, it is known, or our business tax in Texas. And that really helps not just the businesses, but it really helps the consumers as well. Because one thing we always say is, Lowe's and Home Depot compete head to head with each other. And if one of them gets a big break and doesn't pass it on, and the other one does, they're going to start getting all the market share in the business from other people. So it does drive down to everybody in those cuts, and makes the economy stronger in the state of Texas, has more people moving here. I don't know if that's always, I'm never just the biggest fan. I just like to see great economic opportunity for those of us that are here and know that we'll attract others. One of the things we did eliminate, Judge Brinkley will be happy to know that we eliminated the occupational taxes in the state. So he and my wife, who pay the $250 tax a year just for the right to say I'm in this occupation, won't have to pay that. So I dealt with a lot of lawyers, financial people, and various other occupations where we just charged because we thought, well, let's pick on these occupations. And so we eliminated those. The comptroller had 8 initiatives that he said, here's some taxes that we collect that maybe takes us more to collect them than it does to be able to, dollars we bring in. I passed 5 of those 8 out of the House. 3 of them I passed completely through as House bills. 2 of them were Senate bills where we eliminated that. The very last bill passed on the very last day was HB 1905, which was my bill. It took one of those comptroller's taxes, and because somehow one of them got messed up over on the Senate side, they put it on. And so what we do is we bring it together, and there's House rules that says you cannot have 2 subject matters. And so I had to go to conference to be able to fix that problem and not be called on what we call point of order and kill the bill. There's 2 things you can do. Most people would say, I'm going to take off that tax cut the Senate put on, and I'm just going to stick with my tax cut so I can get credit for a tax cut. Instead, I grabbed 7 other tax cuts, put them on top of the ones that the Senate had, and then I passed 9 tax cuts at once. All of them little. One of them was like, they had to collect a nickel tax on every beer sold on an airplane that originated out of the state of Texas. It's an accounting logistical nightmare to be able to do that. Rural ambulances, we gave them a tax cut, and the fact that they no longer have to pay the road tax on their fuel, that helps us with our rural ambulance services across the state. And so, things like that were, I was proud to be able to do that. One part of that we may just now be able to understand, I was actually trying to help out a colleague, and the best thing about Texas is we're not like Washington, D.C. We actually talk with our Democratic counterparts, and we work with them. And if they have a good idea, we're not afraid to take that good idea. If they have a bad idea, we're not afraid to tell them it's a bad idea and we're going to kill it. And there is an advantage having 98 House members that are Republican. But we had one down in the Valley, sort of was representing a rural area, and their EDC was being charged almost 30% of their budget to run their EDC as paying property taxes on basically their industrial park. Well, it's like, why are we taking property taxes from one taxing entity to pay to another taxing entity? We basically said, EDC-owned property that's just being held for development is not taxed anymore. And so that's going to benefit all of our economic developments and a lot of our small ones around the state. Because like Gainesville, we hold an industrial park. A lot of the folks elsewhere don't necessarily do that. So I think that that's going to turn out to be a good one as well. Last sort of big thing was dealt with transportation. One of the things we did, we ended some of the diversions. So today we pay 20 cents of state tax on each gallon of gasoline. we've used that not only to build roads, but we've used it to build toll roads. We've used it for DPS. We've used it for a number of other things that fall under the guise of transportation. We ended that diversion, and it won't be there anymore. So that money is available now to be able to build just public roads. And then we dedicated additional money coming out of the sales tax of vehicles. And that's going to generate $2.5 billion of additional funding every year that TxDOT can count on to be able to build public roads. And I make sure that when we talk about that, that is not just to build public roads where it's only measured by congestion. That's to build new shoulders on FM roads that affect most of us in rural Texas, because that's really a lot of our challenges. We're not looking for new lane miles. We want to know that our bridges are in good shape, that we're getting overlays, that our farm to market roads have shoulders on it, that our school buses are safe driving on, from that standpoint. We did all this while we still left over $11 billion in the rainy day fund in case we have a problem. We've got money set aside to be able to address that from that standpoint. So it leaves the borrowing power in the state of Texas in a great spot to be. On education, we passed several things. One of the things that we passed dealt with that schools, instead of the old scoring system and exceptional and exemplary and all the other different terms that were out there, they're now going to be A through F. It's the way our kids get our report cards, the way we know, and we heard a cry from the public parents that they wanted to be able to understand better of how their kids were scored and the schools were scored. And so we adopted the A through F system. And we're going to have to work through that and see how that goes. When we change, not everything happens perfectly right off the chute. HB5 is one of them that we did last session. We haven't worked everything out in HB5 yet, but we continue to work forward with that. Our retired teachers, we were able to take care of them and the fact that they didn't have to have health care increases in their policy this biennium. And so we were able to work with them. That was one of their great concerns. We got a big group studying that this interim to figure out how are we going to get our hands around the rising cost of health care as it relates to our teachers. Well, I'm about to have to pull my glasses out. My writing's so small I can't see. That's the other thing I found out real quick that I did. It came through here. Yeah, I should remember my own bill. Dual credits. So one of the bills we passed, and and this is why I like coming out like this. I was talking to a superintendent in Bryson, Texas, and he told me about a problem. And I thought, well, maybe it just affects Bryson. And I found out it affected kids from all over the state. And what it dealt with was that said you could only take, because of HB5, once again, another thing we found, well, I think I'm really proud of what we passed in the 83rd. HB5 limited kids to be able to only take 9 hours of classes from a community college outside of their district. Well, in Bryson, that's a big deal because they're only 10 miles from Graham, where NCTC is. But Weatherford College, they're 80 miles away from, and they don't have a campus to go take on. So they could only take 9 hours at Graham, and after that, they were stuck. So kids who lived in Bryson, Texas, were at a disadvantage versus kids who live in Valley View or in Gainesville that are right next to NCTC, and that was the most convenient school for them. So we were able to pass that on as well. Speaking of higher ed, we passed tuition revenue bonds. It's going to allow all of our universities, from University of North Texas, Texas Tech, to be able to add some buildings to their system and be able to keep tuition rates lower than what they would have to raise to pay for them themselves on that. Some of the things that we do aren't always what we pass, but a lot of times what I think my bigger calling is, and I've been called Representative Bracket because what I'm known for is bracketing rural Texas out of a lot of laws and a lot of regulations that are overburdensome. One of them we had this year had to do with special ed video machines or cameras in every single classroom. And some of the stories we heard were just horrific. But I know that I've never once heard anything remotely like that happening in rural Texas, because I also know the parents and the superintendents and the principals would be sitting here saying, we would never let that happen without diving right into it. And so what I did by bracketing us out, basically school districts below 5,000 don't have to put cameras in every classroom. But if the school board here at Valley View decides, hey, we do want to have cameras, you've got every right to be able to do that. I just didn't want to put that financial cost to try to solve a problem that doesn't exist on rural Texas. And I think that it's one of the things that I take the most serious about mine. And while it doesn't have bill numbers attached to it, that's one of the things we definitely work towards. The governor came out with 5 initiatives that he was looking for in his state of the emergency speech. One of them was developing research for higher education to raise our universities in Texas. I had the bill that enabled that. The language that was finally passed in there was the language that my Chief of Staff, Jonathan Mathers, and I worked on and the rest of my staff. It set up the research and driving the universities to be able to have funding to do that, but at the same time, it eliminated the Emerging Technology Fund, which was using twice as much money as we're going to put into research. And that was where we thought we were going to be the venture capitalist of last resort. We're going to take your tax dollars and we're going to go give it to a techie company that's never built anything, but they got a really good looking, white sheet of paper of an idea they have. And it just has never panned out for us. And so we're going to quit being that venture capitalist and we're going to start getting back into what we really should be doing, proven research and things from that standpoint. Second Amendment wise, I'm going to jump into my favorite one. I know this will probably surprise everybody in here because it's not campus carry or open carry. My favorite one that we did this session was TSA at the airports. Everybody thought when TSA came in and people started getting arrested for mistakenly carrying their guns into the airport that had their concealed license, that it had to be a federal law and you were getting charged with a felony and you were paying $10,000 to $20,000 to basically get out of it, keep your gun, and about a year for you got your license and your gun back, and it just, it was just aggravating. Half the people arrested in DFW were over 65. I passed the bill that says if you make that mistake, they can send you back to your car, and you put your gun back in your car and go back to your house and come on back in. You don't miss your flight. You don't become a felon. You don't spend a ton of money with the lawyers. And now the lawyers are going to be mad at me. I saved them money over here and it cost them money over here. But, those are the kind of things that I think are good, logical things that we solve. Open carry. We did pass open license carry. You do have to have what today we call a CHL. Well, I'm sure we'll just call it a gun license going forward. That you have to have that to be able to carry openly. I know a lot of people are worried about it. There was a deal about Whataburger just came out and said basically they're not going to allow it. How will you know when you go in? Instead of today, there's a sign that says 30-06, and I think maybe Starbucks doesn't allow. And you see that sign. That tells you as a gun owner from the parking lot, you can see that sign that says, I can't carry my gun into that store. They forbid it. I can either leave it in my car or I don't have to take my dollars and go shop at this establishment. Whataburger is going to put up what they probably call, which is called a 30-07 sign, which means you're allowed to carry concealed because they don't have the 30-06, but you're not able to carry openly from that standpoint. Campus carry, we did pass campus carry, and we're giving some flexibility to the Board of Regents, the chancellors, and the students to decide where those will be carried on campus in some of the choices that go through that. But I have argued, back when Eddie was, Dr. Hadlock was here at NCTC, that my biggest issue was not that I was trying to get my 21-year-old to be able to carry concealed when he went to NCTC, but I was trying to get that 45, 50-year-old lady who was going back taking night classes, and it was January, and she's getting out of class, and she's having to walk across a dark parking lot by herself, where she's really vulnerable, that if she has her concealed license, she should be able to carry. I think we have, the statistics prove it up, that those who want to break the law will break the law. They don't care what signs we put up anywhere, whether it's hospitals, and we saw in Pennsylvania where a guy broke the rules. So clearly stated, you can't carry a gun in a hospital in Pennsylvania. He did. He went in and started trying to shoot all the medical staff. He killed one before a doctor pulled his gun out. It's still under suit because he probably wasn't supposed to have it, shot and killed the intruder. In Maryland, the same thing happened. A guy was mad at the way his mother had been treated in the hospital or lack of treatment. He pulls a gun out and shoots the doctor. Now then he turns and shoots himself. Signs never are going to stop these crazy lunatics. Now, the best thing we can do to help them is we can put more money into mental health. And the state of Texas has done that. We did it last session. We did more this session. You know, we need to make sure those people that have mental problems are receiving the help that they can. But I'm a big supporter in the fact that legal citizens should be able to have that right to defend themselves. On pro-life, we passed really a couple really big issues. One was 3994 that dealt with, it was called judicial bypass. It's when basically they go find a judge that will let a minor get an abortion without getting approval or talking to their parents. And so we closed that loophole in there. The other one, and when we talk about being pro-life, a lot of times we forget about end of life is just as important as beginning of life. And in Texas, we were the second worst state in the nation in the fact that where doctors could take food and water away from a patient, basically kill them at their sort of discretion. And so we put in massive rules that says the very, very few times they can do that. All three of the pro-life groups got on board. It was the first time in the last decade that all three groups have agreed to support something in advance of it going to the House floor. So I was extremely happy to be able to work with all three of them, and both the doctors, the hospitals, the Catholic Church was big supporters of this. They're very strong believers in the end of life, and work with them to get that done. The last part, and then we'll jump into sort of y'all's questions, is really some of the rural things we did, because at the end of the day, there's less than 20 of us that are rural legislators. And I try to lean on a whole lot of them. They may only have 2 counties, and they may live in a town of 70,000 and they think they're rural, but they also live about 30 minutes from Dallas. And so you're constantly trying to help them understand maybe what some of the real issues are that we face down here. One of the things you'll see in November when you go vote for tax cuts is Proposition 5. It allows, today in the Constitution, and unfortunately it had to be in the Constitution, if you're in a county below 5,000, the county commissioners could do private road work for hire. We're going to raise that to 7,500. That helps 3 of my 22 counties. Garza County, Floyd County, and Childress County will now be able to do that. And you sort of say, well, geez, they're going to compete against the private people who do that work. Well, nobody is doing that in small counties in Texas. So in Floyd County, a guy has to hire somebody out of Lubbock to come out because he built a barn and grade a road for him out there, even though the county road grader is going right by and probably for a couple $100 would do it. It cost him $4,000 to get everything moved out to do what is a $200 job otherwise. So that was answering that call from that. For counties below 10,000, we're going to allow them to mow and bale the right-of-way on the FM roads. If that's successful, and I was with TxDOT this morning, we're going to try to raise it up in the counties at 25,000 or counties at 50,000. Working with that area engineer, because as we know, there's not enough money to mow the right-of-ways as much as we need to for the wildlife that travels up and down ours. And this will give rural Texas the ability to take care of themselves. While they're cutting it, they'll be able to keep that forage to be able to feed their cattle or whatever livestock that they have in there. We had another carve-out. There was a big issue in Dallas that they send people to Wichita Falls to the mental hospital. That's the prison. Actually, they send them to Vernon in my district, which is the mental hospital. They treat them, they cure them, they get them ready to serve trial, they send them back to the county. The county then would sit on them for 60 days. They would become mentally ill again, and they couldn't stand trial, and they go back and forth, back and forth. Well, they had a bill that said, well, you have 14 days to restart the trial, and all the other things have to happen. We carved it out for counties less than 100,000 don't have to do that. And our argument was, we don't do that in Cook County because we know how much it costs the county jail to house that inmate. We want to get them going through as fast as possible. But in some of my smaller counties, the judge is a circuit rider, and he may not be there. It's physically impossible to have those trials, and we'd have to set those people free. And so we were able to address that and get that taken care of. Thank you. I had a bill that did custom harvesters. There's about 500 movements across the state of Texas every year where they have these big harvesters that come in, harvest wheat, corn, sorghum. They would get to the Texas border and they'd have to break that load down into 2 loads. We added another 6 to 8 feet, I think it was, on the ordinance. They're very light loads going down, but they're very big and long. But this allows to save the farmer money so he can be able to get his crops cut cheaper, and it's going to make Texas agriculture more competitive with Oklahoma and Nebraska. Did one for several of our hospital districts here locally in Gainesville. They wanted to build a new health clinic. They wanted to be able to put that clinic up as collateral to do that project. The attorney for the hospital association wasn't real happy with me because I bracketed it and said it could only do $2.5 million, because there was some concerns that, we have $20 million of equity in the hospital, and they could borrow all $20 million to run operations, and then we'd be totally in debt with no equity. I believe that the board was doing the right things. We gave them what they wanted. We gave them the ability to be able to pledge the assets of a new clinic. I think they've got plans to build one on Grand Avenue in Gainesville, and so, that was a good deal for them. One of the things that I didn't win legislatively, although I might have won at the end of the day, is I tried to argue that for non-metropolitan counties, and that's a new term I sort of made up, but that county is less than 300,000. There's only 16 counties in the state of Texas that are above 16, that are in those 16 counties. 70% of the people live in there. So 30% of the people in the state of Texas live in the other 238 counties in Texas. Well, the problem we have is in the Enterprise Fund for Economic Development, we don't see a lot of that money, if any at all, come out into these counties, those 238. I wanted to see at least 20% of the money come out to where 30% of the people live. Well, you can imagine if there's 70% of the people living there, that means they have 70% of the state representatives. And when you start arguing that you want fairness and you represent rural Texas, every now and then you can get overwhelmed in those numbers. And they rose up against me, and they said no. And so I was giving them sort of my bully pulpit. I know I'm losing this, and I know you SOBs are this, and we're going after them on it. And I said, but I hope the governor hears me loud and clear. 30 minutes later, the governor's office walks over to my desk, and I have a real good working relationship with Governor Abbott's team. And they said, Drew, we hear you loud and clear, and we don't need legislation to make that happen. We want to work with you and your staff to figure out how we put the processes in place, to figure out how Valley View, how Gainesville, how Montague, all the way to Childress, how do we benefit and attract companies that are 25 to 200, not trying to find companies that are 5,000 like a Toyota or a Caterpillar to come to the state of Texas. So I look forward to continue to work with them on that. In the interim, we're off until next session starts January 2017. As I said, I was working in culture, recreation, and tourism. I sat in a committee hearing yesterday in Austin that dealt with deer breeding. I have a whole lot of deer breeders in my district. While I'm not on that committee, I have the ability to go sit on any committee I want to at any time. And I chose to yesterday to make sure our constituents were represented. Coming out doing, I think, 35 town halls here in the next, between now and the end of 1st of August. But then we're going to start working on what do y'all see as issues that we need to address? How can we either answer them, hopefully, during the interim? Sometimes it's as easy as, I had text out of my office this morning talking about Highway 51 in Era, which is a problem for the people who travel up 51 and 922 and go back and forth and know that intersection, and being able to figure out what's a solution that's going to work for everybody there. And if we have a way of playing that, what can we do? And so, those are many of the other things I think that will take place in the interim. And I know one last thing, because I wrote it on the back and I missed it. A lot of people ask on some of the other social issues, especially with the Supreme Court rulings that just came down. One of the things we did pass pastor protection that does not force, if a pastor cannot be forced to marry somebody of the same sex, that he disagrees with that if he doesn't want to. So, we were able to do that. Extremely disappointed in the Supreme Court on multiple rulings that they made last week in regards to several things. But we'll continue to work in the state of Texas. I've always said that it becomes the law of the land. We just got to work to get legislators up there and executive branch that will put this country back in the direction that we all expect it to go. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Get your water, Drew.
Do what?
Go ahead and drink some water.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, it's a good thing is, so speaking of drinking water, there is a funny one there. So I might have actually passed 12 bills, except number 12 got snagged by the governor. The governor only vetoed 48 bills, and one of them was mine. And so I actually went to the signing for my end of life deal, and I took the form to him, or the bill to him, and said, hey, would you write veto on the top of this and write better luck next time and sign it? And he did. You know, Governor Adams got a good sense of humor, but I sort of asked him, it's like, here's what the bill was, and I've yet to find anybody but him that sort of disagreed with it, and I do know why he did, because the agency got a hold of him and cried that it was going to go crazy, but I don't think it would have. But what we have an issue with is in Post, Texas, in Childress, Texas, in Wichita Falls, that we would be in stage 5 drought. We're telling you can't wash your car, you can't mow your lawn, you're going to lose all your shrubs, everything's going to die, it doesn't matter how much you've spent. You know, there's barely enough water. You know, Wichita Falls has got 90 days left. Wichita Falls went, the consumers or the citizens used 55% less water than they were using before the drought when they started doing all their stage 5 setbacks. The prison used 3 to 5% more water than they had been using. It was their way to get back at the people. They just leave the showers going 24/7. They actually put their drinks in their toilet, and every 5 minutes they flush it because it keeps their drinks cold. Well, I'm like, turn on the valves to the water for 15 minutes every 4 to 12 hours, and they'll figure out the schedule and work around that. It wasn't trying to be mean. We're putting that on our own citizens. We needed to do that. The agency thought they were going to have to replace all their toilets, the low-flow toilets, and I said, look, and they thought, I think the governor thought maybe the locals were going to have too much control over the state prisons. We'll work with them on the interim to get it right. But, you know, thank God for him, it rained for the whole month of May, and the lakes filled in Wichita Falls, because I don't know how you go back and tell people in Wichita Falls they got to keep drinking reuse water while the prison can keep using as much as they want. So, but, you learn down there, you're better off, you laugh about it, figure out, hey, what can we do to get something to go forward, and we'll work on the interim on that one as well. But so, yeah, when you mentioned water, it made me think of that. And on water, you know, Jason and the commissioners, along with Ray Fletcher, and we've been working with FEMA, and I was down with DPS last week at their emergency management bunkers down there in Austin, to where they have all this laid out. Sort of FEMA comes in and evaluates that, then the DPS state of Texas emergency management runs those programs to figures out, you know, how can we replace, I think, almost $6 million worth of road damage.
7.2.
How much?
7.2.
$7.2 million road damage in Cook County. You know, 75% of that comes from federal relief money. 25% is going to have to come from us that live right here. So, but, you know, we've got to manage that process and get it through and make sure we do the right things. And unfortunately, this day and age, that includes a lot of record keeping and making sure you use the right contractors, and so you can get reimbursed. And, you know, if you deal with the feds and you realize that, you know, you can't do things tomorrow that make common sense, you got to submit a lot of paperwork and wait a year to figure out the fact that the road is now the creek, and so you're going to have to go over into this cow pasture and cut a new road. And they say, well, we're going to have to study that. We're going to have to do environmental, and we're going to have to look at, you know, do any little bugs live that are unique to that area, and we'll have to get some bug guys out here and all those crazy things to be able to do that. So, but Jason and the guys are doing a good job of, you know, I look back to the last floods we had, and the fact that Gainesville didn't flood, and some of the work we did on the creeks, and Lindsay did over in their areas, that we didn't have the loss that we had in the last time. So, you know, we've used as a learning experience and improve our infrastructure to be able to make sure water moves in that regard. What else can I answer?
You know, House Bill 1307 was a good bill. It was designed to help rural hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
This hospital out here is on life support too. I don't know whether you were aware of it or not. You fought so hard to get that passed.
Yeah.
They started out 3 years ago with $12 million in the bank. It's not there anymore. There's no patients out there.
Yeah.
They've isolated all the local doctors by bringing in the high-powered doctors that people don't want those. I tell you what, I was, you know,
there was anything on disappointment, just whether it was my bills, and I had a bill that dealt with, silly regulation over using safety belts in wheelchairs. People who want them, now it's illegal to use them, and I've had one person die and one person get a head injury, and I got groups that are fighting us on that stuff. But Sunset, Health and Human Services was up for Sunset this year. And there was a lot of good things that were going to help some of our, especially rural hospitals in there. And that bill got caught up into what some other people saw, had to deal with living centers in Austin. And I know if you have a living center and there's 200 people live there, and those people probably live close to their families, and it's near and dear to their hearts. That facility was designed to house 2,000 people, not 200 people. It's in a prime spot of Austin. They could have sold that, built another facility that would have been state-of-the-art to take care of 300 people, and still had money left over. That one, we need to put about $1 billion, and you may have saw in some of the Austin newspapers. The fire alarm system didn't work, and they were paying people full-time to act like human alarms, and their job was to walk around that facility and make sure there wasn't a fire, because it was the school for the deaf. We can do smarter things with our money than with those in there. And that bill just sort of got tagged on, and sunset bills are very difficult to pass, especially when it deals with all the medical issues. Everybody gets very defensive, whether it's CHIPS, DADS, all the other different ones. But the thing that disappointed me the most was we had some of the fixing for the cuts that they had to make in the 82nd for the rural hospitals under Medicaid. And as you know, having served on the hospital board, a lot of our rural hospitals, 30% of our patients are Medicaid patients. And when you cut that payment down there, it doesn't hurt, Presbyterian in Dallas that only sees 3% Medicaid patients because they're in an affluent area. But it hurts us in rural Texas, where we also don't have the volume that they have down there in the Metroplex.
Well, see, I don't think this hospital here, even bill Medicaid now, you have to be in the top 10 producing hospitals. They're not even they're below the bottom.
Yeah, and
so they can't even bill Medicaid anymore.
The one of the things I'm looking forward to is the new president of Texas Hospital Association is actually the administrator out of Childress, a young guy named John Henderson. I look to Torch, which is the Rural Hospital Association. John understands these things. And so figuring out what we can do from his standpoint to put some things in place to do that. We've screamed at the feds. Arkansas did it to a degree. We've said, look, we'll cover more people and be able to do it better if you block granted us our money back to the state of Texas and let us run our own Medicaid system. If we can get rid of all the crazy regulations, all the things that go on, we'll cover people even further than they get covered today. And you say, well, how would that happen? Well, we might figure out that somebody who makes $45,000 as a family, but that's still going to be covered under Medicaid, may have to pay a $50 copayment to go to the emergency room to get $10,000 worth of service. Somebody on the lower end of the scale that may only make $5,000 or $10,000 may have to pay $5 as a copay. Because sometimes that changes your mindset. Something being free, I can go unlimited, to I have some level of skin in the game, that we can set that in place. We can also say is as you go to 45, and if that's the cutoff today, the biggest problem we have is, well, if I make over this, I lose $20,000 of benefits. It's not all in Medicaid, but it's a big chunk. And so you'll have people say, I don't want to work anymore because I'm going to make too much money and I'm going to lose this. In the real world, in our businesses, we stair-step that. Because if we had customers that would say, well, I'm not going to spend any more money with you because I'll lose this, we'll stair-step them down and say, every time you do, we'll both share in that until we eliminate that. And so instead of 45 being a cliff, we may cover them until they're $55,000. But you're going to get cutback payments going through there. And, we can work. We're the 12th largest economy in the world. If we can't figure out how to do this without the help of the federal government, somebody else will replace us, and they'll figure out how to do that. And that's what we've got to be able to do, because then we can also show the way. I've said along, man, I'm happy with a minimum wage set wherever they want. If it's in Oregon, and let Texas set ours, and let them have lifetime unemployment You know, in California, at a wage wherever they think it is, we may have a different set of rules here in Texas, and we'll figure out where it all sort of balances out in there. I don't think Texas would become the Wild Wild West that says nobody gets anything and we're going to let people die in the streets. That's the same argument that was made when we did CHL that said we're going to start shooting people over parking spots. It didn't happen. We're going to listen to our constituents. We're Christian based. We're going to do the right thing. But we want to see people put skin in the game and continue to work. Yes, Steve?
Yeah, the Senate passed a bill, if my understanding is correct, to cut the property taxes $15,000, but raise the homestead exemption by $15,000, and it was supposed to be indexed for inflation going forward. And I called your office, and they were trying to talk me into telling me the sales tax was better, and I asked them to read the Republican platform because it certainly isn't what's in the Republican platform. Somehow the House then, after they finally got off Strauss's idea that sales tax reduction was better, somehow the House cut out $5,000 of that property tax homestead exemption, and they took away the index for inflation. Could you explain how that happened?
Yeah, when the Ways and Means meets between the House and Senate conference and figures out what are we going to do, and we negotiate a solution. We were at 25% cut on the business. They were at a 15% cut. You know, we came up to where the House was on that. We abandoned the sales tax. Thought was, hey, it's a tax cut that's about the same for everybody, whether you're a renter or a homeowner, as what the tax cut's going to be on the homestead side of things. And so that was part of the negotiations. It says, look, we'll raise it 10,000, we'll set up it in here. You know, one of the biggest arguments we heard, especially being on Ways and Means, was really unique. We get people come in and say, you know, and most of it was Houston. I mean, it's not rural Texas. In rural Texas, we hadn't seen near the level that Houston has experienced. And they come in and they want to say it's the appraisal district's fault that their taxes went up. And I would say the appraisal district's supposed to set what the market rate is. It's the local taxing entity that then gets to determine what that rate is. And if they want to grow government or not. If it takes $20 million to run Cook County, Jason just put a budget together that says, I mean, he didn't sit here and say, well, if appraisals go up, I'll do this and I'll leave the rate exactly here. Nobody will realize we grew government. He just does what, you know, him and the courts can do what the right thing is, that they think the right thing to run this with your feedback, my feedback as taxpayers of what that is. And we wanted to push the tax rate issue to the local level, which it should be. It's one of the things I'm asking to be studied in the interim. How can we make sure that our taxpayers that pay property taxes know who controls that tax rate? It's that local taxing entity. It's not the state of Texas. But we get emails all the time. You've set my tax rates too high. Well, I don't set your county road and bridge tax rate. I don't set your mud district if you're in a municipal utility district. So I had to learn what those were, since we don't have any of those in Cook County. From that standpoint, we did it. You know, is it perfect? No, I'd rather have both. Of course I would. I mean, you know, and as far as the sales tax go, here's my challenge with that. And one of the things that may make that tougher to ever happen, part of the constitutional amendment says that we will never tax property transactions. So it's not that we would tax them at 6.25%, but we can't tax them at 1%. If I said we could tax all property transfers at 1% and raise our sales tax 0.5%, but we get away with, we no longer have any school property taxes, leave the county and local hospitals alone, but just the biggest portion of everybody's a school, and we have no school property tax. I think a lot of people might go for that, but now we can't use that in there. If it passes, I think it'll pass. I think it makes it a challenge if you can't eliminate all that property tax at once to be able to do that. There were also some measurements that when we had the hearings that came and said if you go to 5.95% on your state property tax, and which is cutting our state tax 0.3% is what the House proposed, that changes our index to where we were ranked much higher in a lot of the economic, where's the best place to live, where's the best place to do business, where's those, and that's what a lot of us work on in that. So that was it. As far as the indexing, that was just sort of, it fell by the wayside in there in that negotiations on that. From there, you know, a lot of people don't like they said, you know, each legislative session ought to stand on their own. Don't tie the hands. You know, I've signed all the ones that said let's change the spending cap to population inflation. And if we're going to go above that, if I think it's needed, I'll vote it, but I'd rather see that the cap than the current cap we use. I'm always for more restraints, and I think my voting record and other things, but on those I am in the minority, you know, in the whole House. Got 5 minutes. Well, the one thing I would say is, you know, if you have any other questions, I mean, you know, Jennifer Vogel's my district director. Office is in Gainesville, right just south of the steps there at the courthouse. You know, you can call the office, you can email us. My whole Austin staff, I brought them up because I wanted them to see a little bit about, you know, what's up in the district. They've been up some and toured some. So Kate Ferguson's my legislative aide. Mark Thornton Thompson is my legislative director, and Jonathan Mathers is my chief of staff. You know, you know, some people go, well, geez, we thought you were small government conservative. And then they laugh when they found out I filed more bills than any other Republican at 61 bills. I said, well, sometimes, unfortunately, you got to file bills to eliminate stuff and bring common sense back. And so I think my one I used to use is, and then maybe one, during the town halls, and I'm going to quit using this one all the time. But this used to be illegal in the state of Texas. These two guys up here could write you a ticket if I clicked my car and started to let it cool off before I got out there, because it's on the books that you cannot have a car running without somebody in it. But they didn't dream that people would have something other than keys to turn a car on when they wrote that law in the 70s. And they didn't know technology would catch up with them that says, you know, we ought to be able to use this. You can't, even if my car's running and the doors are open, unless this key is this far from the ignition, it won't run. And so, or at least won't go into drive. And so that was one of the bills we passed. So fun ones like that as well. So, you know, again, I want to thank the guys, our DPS guys, for all their hard work down there at the border, and then what they do every day for us here. It's, you know, my hats go off to them. I can't imagine every day having to walk up with the car and not knowing who you're going to walk into with some of the cartel activities we see. It's just bad dudes all together. It's a difficult situation. But if you have a question on any other legislation, you can call the Austin office. We'll usually bounce it around between everybody. Don't be shy. If we don't get back with you, let us know. We try to send out an email once a month during session, about 3 times a month, just sort of saying, here's what's going on in the district and the state to keep you up to date. Hopefully we can get your email addresses, keep you up there. Try to post some stuff on Facebook. We tried to run through a bunch of bills, and with filing that many, the last couple of weeks have been sort of really boring, and we'll get on to more fun topics now going forward. But I try to do, usually about 3 to 4 posts a week, just to let people know where I'm going to be, what's going on, what we're working on. But feel free to give me a call anytime. I appreciate everybody coming out.